Bank manager makes black man wait 2 hours. Her face changes when board members walk in. Welcome, dear viewers, to a tale of secrets, prejudice, and retribution that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Today, we delve into a gripping story set in a seemingly ordinary bank lobby, where appearances are often deceiving and hidden truths lurk beneath polite smiles. As we unravel the intricate web of corporate politics and personal vendettas, prepare yourself for astonishing twists and heart-stopping revelations that redefine the boundaries of justice. This narrative will show how one small act of discrimination can trigger a cascade of life-altering consequences both for the victim and those who presumed they wielded power. Buckle up and stay tuned for a suspenseful journey that will leave you speechless. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Nestled between a busy Starbucks and a swanky hair salon stood an imposing Bank of America branch, with tinted glass doors that concealed the daily hustle. On the surface, it looked like any other financial institution: pristine marble floors, neat rows of teller windows, and a well-dressed manager always eager to greet new customers, especially if they appeared affluent. However, behind these sophisticated trappings lay a culture that thrived on invisible hierarchies, unspoken biases, and unyielding ambition. Linda Pearson, the branch manager, was the embodiment of corporate polish, greeting high-profile clients in her tailored black suit with an almost theatrical display of warmth. She'd grown adept at reading people from a distance, observing their shoes, their handbags, their posture, and even the type of smartphone they used. Like a card dealer in a high-stakes game, she assigned each customer a ranking in her mind. Sometimes she was right, but sometimes, when blinded by her own prejudices, she could be dangerously wrong. Little did Linda know that on one fateful morning, a single interaction in the lobby would trigger events far beyond her control. And as the tension escalated, her entire future teetered on the brink, about to be toppled by her own hubris. It was a warm Thursday morning in June when James Wheeler pushed open the heavy glass door of the branch. Dressed in a smart navy blue suit and carrying a slim leather briefcase, he looked professional, though his tie was modest, and his dress shoes bore the wear of many steps. James, a tall black man with a reserved demeanor, paused at the threshold, taking in the sight of anxious customers waiting in line. He had visited multiple banks the previous week to explore options for a substantial business loan. Owning a chain of small but successful tech repair shops, he needed funding for expansion and planned to bring job opportunities to underserved neighborhoods. Hoping to keep his personal life low-key, James rarely boasted about his successes. He believed professional competence spoke for itself. Linda scanned the lobby and immediately sized him up, concluding he was just another customer, someone who might waste her time. Despite James's suit, her first impression zeroed in on his worn shoes and scuffed briefcase. And when her gaze flickered to his face, a subtle smirk curled her lips, conveying a silent, dismissive message. She turned on her heel, intending to let him wait until she deemed him worthy of her attention. James approached the sleek reception desk, politely addressing a young teller named Maria, who was new to the team. She was aware of Linda's intimidating presence, so she typically asked the manager before forwarding special requests. James explained that he had an appointment to discuss a loan, sliding a crisp folder across the desk that contained detailed financial statements, a thorough business plan, and reference letters from satisfied clients. Maria scanned his documents, brows lifting in admiration at the thoroughness. She was about to invite him into an available office when Linda's sharp voice cut through the chatter. "Is that the gentleman for the business loan consultation?" she asked, though her tone dripped with skepticism. Maria nodded, offering a sweet smile to James. Linda narrowed her eyes. "I'll handle it," she said curtly. Turning to James, she added, "There's a bit of a wait today. Have a seat, and we'll get to you." James frowned, but kept his composure. He could sense something amiss in her tone, but decided not to jump to conclusions. He made his way to a leather chair in the waiting area. The digital clock on the wall ticked away as he settled in, bracing himself for the meeting ahead. Minutes turned into half an hour, then an hour. The hum of hushed conversations and the distant ring of telephones grew more aggravating with each passing moment. Linda escorted other customers to vacant cubicles, people who had arrived well after James. He watched in frustration as several individuals, some in casual attire, some with disorganized files, received immediate attention. He attempted to remain calm, reminding himself that an emotional outburst would not help. Still, it was hard to quell the growing knot in his stomach as he realized he was being deliberately sidelined. Every time he looked at Linda, she was either engrossed in her computer or chatting with another customer, never once making eye contact with him. After nearly 2 hours, James's patience was frayed. He approached the reception desk a second time, only to find that Linda was conveniently too busy. Maria looked sympathetic, but seemed powerless under her manager's watchful gaze. James wondered whether he should leave and try another branch, yet something about Linda's dismissive treatment felt like a personal challenge. Unknown to James, behind the scenes, a ticking time bomb was waiting to explode, one that would expose Linda's prejudices, topple her carefully constructed image, and irrevocably shift the power balance. As James waited, an unexpected commotion broke the monotony of the lobby. A tall woman with a commanding presence swept in through the doors. Her high heels clicked against the marble, and a hush fell over the space. This was Caroline Walsh, a regional vice president within Bank of America. She had a reputation for cutting through red tape and shaking up complacent branches. Her unannounced appearances were legendary and usually spelled trouble for anyone failing to maintain the bank's standards. Trailing Caroline was a distinguished-looking gentleman in a tailored suit, accompanied by 2 more high-ranking officials. James guessed they might be from upper management, possibly in town to evaluate performance metrics. For a moment, Linda's confident poise wavered when she caught sight of the group. She quickly composed herself, offering them her most dazzling smile. "Welcome. I had no idea you were visiting today," Linda said, a slightly nervous edge creeping into her voice. Caroline, scanning the lobby, wasted no time with pleasantries. "We're here for an inspection," she said, flatly, her gaze settling on James. A flicker of curiosity passed over her face. He stood to the side, still holding his file. Caroline's eyes narrowed, sensing an imbalance. She turned to Linda. "Is everything running smoothly here?" Linda's heartbeat quickened. She didn't want to make a scene, but she couldn't ignore Caroline's direct question. "Yes, everything is in order," she declared, her voice a shade too bright. "We're just a little busy at the moment." Caroline's eyes darted from Linda to James and back. She noticed the tense set of James's jaw, his extended weight made all too obvious by his anxious posture. Before Linda could distract her, Caroline strode across the lobby and approached James with a professional but warm smile. "I'm Caroline Walsh, Regional Vice President," she said, extending her hand. "How can we assist you today?" James glanced from Caroline to Linda, uncertain how much to reveal in front of the manager who had been ignoring him. But his frustration spilled out, and he politely explained that he'd had an appointment regarding a business loan and had been waiting nearly 2 hours. The color drained from Linda's face. Caroline's expression tightened. 2 hours? That's unacceptable. She shot Linda a pointed look. "Mr. Wheeler, let's step into an office right now. We'll review your documents." Linda froze, torn between anger at James for tattling and terror over how this would reflect on her. The reality was quickly setting in. Her hidden biases might soon become glaringly public. James followed Caroline to a glass-walled conference room at the far end of the lobby. The passing customers parted like a sea, aware that something significant was unfolding. Linda hurried after them, struggling to maintain the appearance of control. Inside the conference room, the tension crackled. Caroline gestured to a seat at the polished wooden table. "Mr. Wheeler, please make yourself comfortable," she said, flipping open her tablet. Two other high-ranking officials from Caroline's entourage joined them. One introduced himself as Mark Dunning, an executive director in charge of small business portfolios, and the other as Gloria Riley, head of community outreach. Gloria offered James a friendly nod. "We're always eager to work with small businesses, especially those focused on technology," she said. Scanning his presentation folder, "I see your plan here. It's quite extensive." James relaxed slightly, heartened by their genuine interest. For the first time that morning, he felt seen and respected. Meanwhile, Linda stood near the door, her face a mask of forced calm. She anticipated questions, pointed ones about why James had been ignored, but none of them asked Linda to speak yet. Instead, Caroline and her colleagues peppered James with questions about his business model, financial projections, and how he planned to expand. With each answer James provided, Mark's and Gloria's eyes lit up with approval. His thorough research and passion for uplifting underserved communities shone through. He described a future where tech repair shops doubled as small training centers, offering paid internships to at-risk youth. Mark shot Caroline an impressed glance. Caroline leaned forward. "Mr. Wheeler, I'll be direct. The bank is always interested in supporting ventures that not only yield profit, but also benefit communities. Your plan shows strong promise. Are you sure you only want the standard small business loan? We might discuss more comprehensive partnership opportunities." James blinked in surprise. He had come here fighting for a single loan and never expected the possibility of anything more. "I'd be happy to explore any avenue that fosters growth," he replied, keeping his voice steady. Before Caroline could continue, Linda's voice cut in, tight with forced politeness. "I'm the branch manager, Caroline. If Mr. Wheeler had only informed me of the size and scope of his project, I would have expedited his request." She forced a laugh. "I assumed it was a smaller matter." Silence filled the room. No one believed that explanation. James's brows furrowed slightly, and he shot Linda a look that said, "Really?" Caroline's lips parted. "I see," she murmured, clearly unconvinced. Caroline quietly studied Linda for a moment before turning her attention back to James. "All right, Mr. Wheeler, let's move forward. Could you walk us through your projected timeline for expansion?" James pulled out a timeline chart. He spoke of lease agreements, local partnerships, projected job opportunities, and the careful approach he intended to take to ensure each new location not only thrived financially, but also offered genuine community uplift. His passion was palpable, making everyone in the room except Linda feel an air of optimistic excitement. Linda's eyes flitted between James's documents and the expressions on her superiors' faces. She sensed the noose tightening around her reputation. If these high-ranking officials discovered the real reason behind James's wait, she knew it would tarnish her track record. But Linda was far from ready to give up her power. She vowed to find a way to make James's loan application seem less favorable. Perhaps she could claim the numbers didn't add up, or that certain forms were missing. Something to justify her earlier stance. She forced a smile as Caroline concluded the preliminary review. But behind that smile, Linda's mind churned with strategies, plots, that might let her salvage control before the situation spiraled completely out of her hands. After about 30 minutes of discussion, Caroline closed her folder, clearly satisfied. Mr. Wheeler will need to run the standard checks, of course, but I don't foresee any major roadblocks if your credit and collateral are in order. Thank you for your patience today. James breathed a sigh of relief. I appreciate your time, Miss Walsh. Thank you. Caroline glanced at Linda. Now, Linda, could you please escort Mr. Wheeler to finalize some documents with our loan officer? I'll be reviewing your branch's operations, but I trust you can handle this matter promptly. Linda's chest tightened, but she managed a nod. Of course. As Linda led James from the conference room, she cast a sidelong glance at him. Please follow me, Mr. Wheeler, she said, her tone clipped but polite enough for the sake of appearances. James's heart pounded. He sensed she was not done with him yet. In a private corner of the branch, behind frosted glass walls, Linda guided him to a seat in front of an empty desk. My loan officer is at lunch, she claimed, her voice laced with fake contrition. Feel free to wait here. James's frustration resurged. How long will that be? He asked, hoping to avoid another indefinite delay. Linda feigned concern. Not more than half an hour, she answered. I'm sure you understand. James steeled himself, aware that confronting her now might escalate tensions, but 2 hours had already been stolen from his day. Another half hour, at least, waited ahead. He drew in a deep breath, forcing himself to remain collected. As he sat there, Linda loomed by the doorway, tapping her heels on the tile floor with an air of authority. Her phone buzzed, and she answered swiftly, turning her back to James. In hushed tones, she discussed something about the quarterly performance review and the numbers not matching. He heard only snippets, but it was clear she was bent on damage control regarding the branch's metrics. 10 minutes dragged by, then 20. Finally, the loan officer appeared, an apologetic young man named Todd, who was truly on his lunch break. Unaware of the tension, Todd swiftly gathered James's documents and typed away at his computer. Within minutes, Todd confirmed that James had an excellent credit history, strong collateral, and references that all checked out. Meanwhile, Linda lurked in the background, arms crossed. Todd glanced up. Linda, everything looks great. He should be approved. Her expression turned stony as she realized she was swiftly losing ground. While Todd printed out some preliminary forms, Linda bent down to whisper into his ear. James couldn't make out the words, but he noticed Todd's face flush with confusion. A cloud of uncertainty darkened Todd's previously cheerful demeanor. Actually, Todd began, looking at James, then glancing at Linda, we need to verify a few more details with the underwriting department. I'll have to submit this for an additional review. James frowned. Is that standard procedure? Todd stammered slightly. Well, we sometimes do it for larger loans, to ensure everything meets compliance. He trailed off. James sensed Todd was parroting Linda's instructions, but Todd seemed uncomfortable. Evidently, this wasn't a typical practice for a loan that clearly met all normal criteria. James's chest tightened. Another delay. Another tactic by Linda. Inwardly, he debated whether to challenge it on the spot or stay patient, letting official procedures run their course. Ultimately, he opted for calm, not wishing to give Linda any ammunition to label him aggressive or impatient. All right, he said with forced composure. I'm willing to wait for the formal review. Linda's lips curved into a small smirk. She thought she had successfully thrown a new hurdle in James's path. But fate had more twists to unveil. Back in the main lobby, Caroline was finishing her inspection with Mark and Gloria. A handful of branch employees had been grilled on policy, compliance, and customer service standards. Maria, the young teller, spoke honestly about how she was trained to handle new customers, revealing a discrepancy between official protocol and Linda's personal approach. Caroline's expression grew concerned as she took notes. Sensing the shift in atmosphere, Linda quickly rejoined the executives. James remained near Todd's desk, politely chatting about underwriting processes. Across the room, Linda offered forced smiles, as though everything were peachy. Finally, Caroline turned her attention to Linda again. "We'd like a quick word with you in your office," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Linda's gut twisted in anxiety. She led the group into her corner office, a glass-walled space outfitted with expensive decor and framed awards. Once the door closed, Caroline did not mince words. "We came here because we received multiple customer complaints about discrimination and extended wait times. Today, we've seen a glimpse of how certain customers are prioritized or not prioritized. Care to explain?" Linda's mouth went dry. She attempted to maintain her composure, but the tension in the room felt as thick as molasses. Clearing her throat, Linda launched into a rehearsed defense. "I assure you, our branch treats every customer with respect. Some complaints can be misunderstandings, especially if a customer lacks the proper documentation or needs additional verification." Mark exchanged a glance with Gloria, who flipped through a small notepad. Gloria spoke up. "We've got consistent feedback that some people, particularly people of color, are being made to wait longer or are asked for more documentation than others. That's a serious issue." Linda's face paled slightly. "I realize how it might look, but I assure you that is not our policy." She exhaled shakily. "Sometimes customers who appear less prepared end up requiring extra checks. We always follow standard protocol." Caroline placed her hands on the desk. "We witnessed James Wheeler waiting for 2 hours despite having all the proper paperwork. This isn't just hearsay. It happened under our noses. Would you care to explain why you personally took in other customers before him?" Linda's eyes darted to the door, desperation beginning to seep into her voice. He never mentioned the magnitude of his venture. I assumed it was a minor inquiry." Caroline's frown deepened. "You assumed?" The implication was clear. Linda's defense was unraveling, revealing the prejudice she tried so hard to mask. As Linda sputtered through a feeble defense, Caroline took a measured breath. "We're instituting a thorough investigation, effective immediately," she stated, her tone final. "Any verified instance of discriminatory behavior will be grounds for disciplinary action." Mark nodded in solemn agreement. "We believe in fair treatment of all customers, as mandated by both bank policies and federal regulations. We can't afford to have a manager who picks and chooses who deserves respect." Gloria's gentle voice contrasted with the severity of the situation. "Linda, we will be auditing every complaint against your branch from the last year. If the pattern is proven, it won't just be your job on the line. It could lead to legal consequences." Linda felt as though her world was caving in. She tried to stand tall, but the gravity of the threat weighed heavily. I understand," she managed to say, though each syllable felt like sandpaper on her tongue. On the other side of the glass walls, James could see Linda's stricken expression through the blinds. Though he didn't know what was being said, it was clear the board members were not pleased. A small flicker of satisfaction coursed through James, yet he remained cautious. Experience taught him that bigotry seldom folded without a fight. Eventually, Caroline and the others left Linda's office, stepping out with stony expressions. Linda emerged shortly after, attempting to reassert her authority by giving instructions to a few employees who seemed uneasy under her scrutiny. She then made her way back to James, who was calmly double-checking his paperwork with Todd. Linda spoke to James in a brittle tone. "We'll inform you once the underwriting process is complete, Mr. Wheeler. That might take a few days or even a week." He nodded, refusing to be provoked by her obvious attempt to prolong the matter. "I appreciate your help," he answered, keeping his voice polite. Linda forced a tight-lipped smile and returned to her station behind the main desk. busily typing away at her computer. For the rest of the afternoon, she kept glancing over at the group of executives who were now scattered across the branch, interviewing employees and inspecting client records. James, sensing that today's battle was mostly won, decided to leave. He shook hands with Todd, who promised to keep him updated. Before he walked out, though, Caroline caught his arm. "Mr. Wheeler," she said, "I'll be in touch with you directly. We value your business." He mustered a smile, grateful for the lifeline. "Thank you, Miss Walsh." Days passed. James filled his time by managing his stores, scheduling meetings with potential investors, and finalizing details for his next project. While he waited for the bank's response, he had no shortage of tasks to handle. But occasionally, a pang of frustration or a flash of concern would cross his mind. Would Linda sabotage his application out of spite? Meanwhile, Linda found herself under intense scrutiny. Several customers had come forward in the wake of the executive's visit, emboldened to share their own experiences of prejudice and discourtesy at the branch. An official inquiry was launched, complete with interviews and cross-examinations of Linda's staff. To make matters worse for Linda, Caroline had insisted that all pending high-value applications be reviewed by an independent team at the regional office. This essentially stripped Linda of any control over James's fate. She was furious. Every step she'd taken to ensure James did not get immediate approval had blown up in her face, exposing her to more suspicion. Yet Linda refused to go down without a fight. In her mind, the blame belonged to James for complaining and making her look bad in front of her superiors. She vowed to find a way to come out of this investigation unscathed, even if it meant stooping to desperate measures. The next Thursday afternoon, James was repairing a customer's laptop at one of his flagship stores when his phone rang. Glancing at the caller ID, he saw an unknown number. He considered letting it go to voicemail but decided to pick up. "Hello, is this James Wheeler?" asked a crisp voice. "Yes, speaking. This is Todd from Bank of America's underwriting department. First, I want to apologize for the delay. We've completed our review, and I'm pleased to inform you that your loan has been approved in principle. There are a few documents left to sign, but we're ready to finalize your funding." James felt a rush of relief. "That's excellent news, Todd. Thank you." Todd hesitated, as though weighing his next words. "I'd like to schedule a meeting so you can come in and finalize things. However, I must inform you that Linda Pearson is still the acting manager. But the meeting is supposed to happen at a neutral conference room in the building next door, per the instructions from the regional office." James found that detail interesting Caroline's influence must be in play, ensuring Linda couldn't interfere. "I'll come in tomorrow if that works," he said, determined to move forward quickly. "Great. Tomorrow at 10. "Perfect," James replied. When Friday morning arrived, James walked into the adjoining office complex, where Todd greeted him with a reassuring smile. A short elevator ride took them to a modern conference room. Inside, a polished wooden table faced a set of large windows overlooking the city. Awaiting him were Caroline, Mark, and Gloria, along with another individual James did not recognize. He was introduced as Michael Harrington, a senior legal advisor from the corporate office. James wondered why a lawyer was present, but he nodded politely. Caroline gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Wheeler, thank you for coming. We wanted to personally ensure this process went smoothly. Our bank believes your venture aligns well with our community-focused initiatives." James offered a small bow of gratitude. "Thank you for the opportunity." Todd distributed papers for James to sign. He scanned through them, verifying that the terms matched their discussions. Everything looked in order, far more favorable than he had originally expected. As James began signing the last page, the door swung open. Linda entered, her expression guarded. She acknowledged Caroline and Mark, but her gaze darted to the documents with a flicker of unease. "I see we're finalizing things," she said, her voice tight. Caroline's cool response, "Indeed we are." Once James finished signing, Caroline extended her hand with a warm smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Wheeler. You are now officially approved for the Small Business Expansion Loan." Cheers and polite applause followed from Mark and Gloria. Even Todd grinned brightly, relieved that everything had gone through. Linda stood off to the side, arms folded, offering only a stiff nod. Michael Harrington stepped forward. "Mr. Wheeler, I'm here to let you know that if you encounter any issues or feel you've been treated unfairly in the future, you can contact my office directly." James shook his hand, gratitude in his voice. "Thank you, I appreciate that." Seeing an opening, Linda tried to soften her demeanor. She approached James with a carefully measured expression. "I'm glad everything worked out in the end, Mr. Wheeler. Our branch is committed to supporting small businesses." She extended her hand, but her eyes betrayed a lingering resentment. James hesitated a fraction of a second before returning the gesture. "Thank you," he answered politely, though he wasn't convinced of her sincerity. Little did Linda know the real reckoning had just begun. Although the loan was now finalized, the investigation into her managerial practices was far from over, and new, unexpected twists waited just around the corner. Unaware of the brewing storm, Linda resumed her day-to-day work at the bank, holding on to the slim hope that she could weather the internal investigation unscathed. Yet an air of unease settled over her as more stories trickled in from customers and staff. Maria, the young teller, was particularly vocal, telling investigators how Linda repeatedly bypassed protocol to favor certain clients. Meanwhile, the corporate office discovered an odd pattern of loan rejections disproportionately affecting minority applicants under Linda's tenure. Their suspicions grew stronger by the day. Caroline had requested direct oversight of Linda's branch and began working closely with the compliance team. A week later, Linda was finishing up a phone call with a potential big-time client, one she hoped would help restore her standing. That's when Caroline and Michael Harrington entered the branch unannounced. Their presence halted Linda's conversation mid-sentence. Summoning her composure, Linda hurried to greet them, but the look on Caroline's face sent a chill through her. "Please come to your office, Linda," Caroline said, her tone no longer guarded, but resolute. "We need to discuss the findings of our investigation." A swarm of dread coiled in Linda's stomach. She knew this moment might be her last chance to salvage her career or watch it crumble irrevocably. In Linda's glass-walled office, Michael Harrington laid out a neat stack of documents on the desk. Caroline stood beside him, arms crossed. Linda hovered near her chair, trying to exude confidence. Michael spoke first, his legal precision shining through every syllable. "We have documented multiple complaints. They indicate a pattern of delaying or denying services to clients based on personal biases rather than policy. The data from the branch's loan approvals corroborate these testimonies." Linda opened her mouth to protest, but Caroline cut her off. "Linda, do you remember an instance 2 months ago where a black couple applying for a mortgage was repeatedly asked for extra documents not required of others?" Linda struggled for a response. I was following protocol." Caroline nodded grimly. "They lodged a complaint that was dismissed by you. We also have records of at least 6 other similar claims. Furthermore, employees like Maria have stated that you instructed them to screen certain clients more thoroughly, which effectively placed an undue burden on minority applicants." The walls seemed to be closing in. Linda's throat felt parched. She wanted to deny everything, but the evidence was too extensive, too damning. Michael slid a paper toward her. "For these reasons, the bank is terminating your employment, effective immediately. We'll also be forwarding these findings to the relevant regulatory bodies. For a moment, Linda simply stared at the termination notice. Her mind swirled with disbelief, anger, and fear. Rage flickered in her eyes as she realized how thoroughly she'd been cornered. It wasn't just about losing her job, it was about the public disgrace and the end of a career she had poured years into. "You can't do this," Linda hissed. "My record has been stellar. I've brought this branch record profits." Caroline met her glare with calm resolve. "Profits gained through discriminatory practices are not acceptable. Our bank has a code of conduct that you violated." Michael added, "Legally, we have no choice but to part ways. You've exposed the institution to liability, and the data is irrefutable." Linda's vision blurred with tears of fury. The world she had so carefully constructed was collapsing in front of her eyes. Snatching up the termination papers, she nearly crumpled them in her grasp. I'll fight this," she spat. "I have connections, you know. This isn't over." Caroline exhaled softly, sorrow etched in her gaze. "Linda, you've made your decisions. Now you'll face the consequences." With that, the newly unemployed manager of the Bank of America branch stormed out of her office, unable to meet the eyes of her soon-to-be former colleagues. News of Linda's termination spread quickly through the branch. Some employees felt relief, while others, those who had admired her drive, were left stunned. Maria stood near a teller window, grappling with a mix of emotions. Despite Linda's dismissive attitude, she had once been a mentor who taught Maria about the intricacies of bank procedures. Later that afternoon, Caroline gathered the staff in the break room to address the situation. She explained the importance of treating every customer equally, and the ramifications of failing to do so. She assured them that leadership would be restructured and a new manager would be hired, one committed to genuine inclusivity. James heard the news through Todd, who called to inform him that Linda was no longer with the bank. A surge of vindication and relief filled him, but he also felt a pang of sympathy for anyone losing a job, even someone who had caused him such distress. Nonetheless, he believed it was a necessary consequence. What James didn't know was that Linda's resentment toward him would linger, driving her to orchestrate one final act of revenge, one that would temporarily turn James's victory into a nightmare of accusations and threatened reputations. 3 days later, James arrived at one of his tech repair shops, expecting a routine morning, but an unmistakable tension crackled in the air. His lead technician, a bright and diligent young man named Carlos, hurried up to him, looking concerned. "Boss, you should see this." He handed James his phone, which was open to a local news blog. The headline read, "Allegations of fraud at local tech business seeking bank loan." James's heart thundered in his chest as he read the short article accusing him of inflating financial statements to secure a large sum from Bank of America. No sources were quoted, but the piece hinted that an anonymous bank manager had alerted authorities to questionable dealings. Instantly, James's thoughts flashed to Linda. He swallowed hard, battling a wave of fury. If Linda had decided to drag his name through the mud, it could endanger his newly approved funding and tarnish his reputation. Before James could process the gravity of the situation, his phone buzzed. It was Todd again, his voice frantic on the other end. "James, you better come down to the bank," he said. "Some investigators want to talk to you. It seems they've received a tip about fraudulent activity." James closed his eyes, inhaling slowly. He knew he was innocent, but proving it would be another battle. Not wanting the accusation to fester, James promptly headed to the bank's regional offices, where Caroline had set up temporary workspaces. Stepping into the imposing lobby, he felt a twisting knot in his stomach. He had just won a victory over discrimination, only to be hit by a smear campaign. Caroline was waiting for him, standing near the security desk. Her face was grim, but she greeted him with a reassuring nod. "I know why you're here." she said quietly, leading him to a small conference room down the hall. Inside, Michael Harrington sat at the table, along with two stern-faced individuals, an investigator from the bank's compliance team and a detective from the local police department. The detective introduced himself as Officer Spencer. "We've received an anonymous tip claiming Mr. Wheeler's financial documents contained falsified data," he began, his tone neutral. "We'd like to ask a few questions." James swallowed, trying to project composure. "Certainly. I have nothing to hide." Michael slid a folder across the table. "We've done a preliminary review of your documents again. So far, everything seems legitimate. But the bank has to cooperate with law enforcement when allegations arise." James nodded. "I understand. Let's clear this up." But even as he spoke, he felt a swell of anger at Linda's audacity. For the next hour, James walked the officials through every detail of his financial statements, profit-loss records, credit reports, and references. He showed them real-time sales data from his stores, as well as validated tax returns from prior years. Caroline corroborated the bank's internal due diligence, explaining that an external auditing team had already cleared James's loan application. The detective listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes. At one point he asked, "Do you have any idea who might have lodged this complaint against you, Mr. Wheeler?" James shot a glance at Caroline, who gave a small nod of encouragement. "I believe it's someone trying to discredit me due to a recent conflict at this very bank," James said carefully. Not mentioning Linda by name, Officer Spencer tapped his pen on his notepad. "We may need a formal statement about that later, but let's wrap up the financial review first." As the minutes ticked by, the tension gradually eased. Michael Harrington and the bank's compliance investigator both expressed confidence in James's financials. Officer Spencer seemed less skeptical, though he maintained a measured neutrality. In the end, the detective collected the files to run his own checks, but admitted there wasn't a solid basis for a criminal case so far. Outside the conference room, Caroline exhaled. "Don't worry, James. The truth will come out. We'll ensure it does." Despite the seemingly positive outcome of the meeting, the article accusing James of fraud had already begun circulating online, thanks to that local news blog. Rumors caught fire on social media, where people debated the story's validity. Some cynics latched onto any whiff of scandal, while community members who knew James defended him vigorously. Eager to limit the damage, James decided to host a small press conference at one of his flagship stores. He invited local journalists, including the author of the blog post, who declined to show. Surrounded by a display of circuit boards, tools, and refurbished computers, James passionately outlined his business model, presented legal documents, and answered every question with transparency. "For years, my company has served this community with affordable tech repair services," James declared. "We've employed locals, offered internships, and have never had a single complaint of impropriety. These allegations are baseless. If anyone has proof otherwise, let them bring it forward." He stood behind a podium featuring his company's logo, looking directly into the cameras. The local newspaper's reporter asked, "Who do you believe is behind these allegations?" James paused, choosing his words carefully. "I have my suspicions, but I'll let the authorities handle that. My focus is on growing this business and serving our customers." The press conference helped quell much of the public skepticism. Over the next few days, more supportive stories and testimonials flooded social media. Longtime clients praised James for his honesty and community focus. Many local entrepreneurs rallied behind him, asserting that the allegations felt malicious and unfounded. In the midst of this public relations recovery, James received a surprising phone call from none other than Linda Pearson herself. Initially, he debated ignoring her call, but a persistent voice in his head told him to see what she wanted. When he answered, Her voice dripped with a mix of bitterness and desperation. "I'm giving you one chance," Linda said. "You can publicly clear my name from any involvement in this fiasco, or I'll make sure more evidence surfaces that hurts you." James's stomach twisted in anger. "Are you threatening me?" Linda released a mirthless laugh. "I'm just giving you fair warning. I know how to manipulate documents. You think your new corporate friends can save you every time." A wave of heat coursed through James's veins, yet he forced his voice to remain calm. "Linda, you've already lost your job. Don't make this worse for yourself." But her only response was a cold silence before the line clicked dead. James realized the final confrontation with Linda might be imminent and far uglier than he'd hoped. That evening, James found himself pacing his living room, torn between anger and a lingering sense of unease. Should he report Linda's call to the police? Should he warn the bank's executives about her threat? Eventually, he made a logical choice. He dialed Michael Harrington, the bank's legal advisor, and relayed the conversation. Michael listened carefully and assured James that he would inform Caroline and the corporate security team. "She's likely desperate, James. But desperation can be dangerous," Michael said. "We'll support you if she attempts anything unlawful." The following day, James received a visit from Officer Spencer, the same detective from before. He wanted to record an official statement regarding the phone threat. James recounted Linda's words as best he could. The officer nodded gravely, taking down every detail. "We might be able to file harassment charges if she continues," Spencer said. A sense of reassurance settled over James. He wasn't alone in this fight. This time, the system was on his side, or at least it appeared that way. Yet, late that night, as James tried to sleep, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. All it read was, "You've been warned." James stared at the screen, a shiver of unease prickling at the back of his neck. Over the next few days, James carried on with business as usual, though he found himself constantly checking his surroundings. He'd hired a local security firm to install cameras and stronger locks at his stores, not wanting to take any chances. Employees noticed his heightened vigilance, but didn't question him. If anything, they admired his commitment to keeping the workplace safe. Meanwhile, Linda's predicament worsened. Word got out that she was under scrutiny not just for discrimination, but also for the false fraud allegations. The bank's legal team threatened her with a defamation lawsuit if she persisted. Yet Linda seemed determined to go down swinging. One afternoon, as James was locking up his flagship store, he heard an engine rev behind him. A car screeched to a halt at the curb. To his astonishment, Linda emerged from the driver's seat, her face twisted with anger. She marched straight toward him, ignoring the startled glances of passers-by. "You couldn't just keep quiet, could you?" she snarled. "You and that meddling Caroline. You cost me everything." James stood his ground, trying to maintain composure. "Linda, this is not the time or place. You need to leave. You're trespassing on my property." Her eyes flickered with rage. "Not until you listen." Linda slammed her car door and strode closer, brandishing a folder thick with papers. "I have documents," she hissed. "They'll prove you lied about your assets. One phone call to the right people and your loan will be rescinded." James's heart hammered. He forced himself to speak calmly. "I've already shown everything to the bank. I have proof that I didn't lie." Linda's lips curled. "Don't you get it? Proof can be forged. That's how I survived so long in this business. You're out of your league." A couple of James's employees, noticing the commotion, stepped out to see what was happening. Sensing an audience, Linda's voice rose in a shrill crescendo. "He's a fraud," she yelled, waving the folder like a weapon. "Ask him why he was so desperate for a loan. He doesn't have the assets he claims." James tensed, resisting the urge to escalate. Linda, you need help. I'm not sure what you think you're accomplishing, but this isn't going to end well for you. Her eyes flickered, a bit unhinged. Oh, I'll get help, she spat. Help dragging your name through the mud until you have nothing left. Before James could respond, she whirled around, got back in her car, and sped off, leaving behind a lingering echo of threats in the night air. Shaken by the encounter, James immediately called Officer Spencer to report Linda's trespassing and her renewed threats. The detective assured him that they were building a case. Don't try to confront her alone, Spencer advised. We'll keep a patrol car in the area for the next few days. The following morning, James woke to a flurry of text messages from friends and colleagues linking him to another online post, this time a social media tirade from a newly made account that claimed to have insider knowledge of James's finances. The post alleged that James had inflated the valuation of his tech stores and was on the brink of bankruptcy. Fortunately, many readers saw the post's anonymity as suspect, and some pointed out evidence that contradicted the claims. Still, the continued smear campaign took its toll on James's peace of mind. That afternoon, James found an unexpected ally waiting for him at his office, Mark Dunning from Bank of America. James, Mark said, offering a firm handshake, Caroline asked me to coordinate with our internal security. We've identified the IP addresses behind those posts, and we've got substantial evidence linking them to Linda. James let out a shaky breath of relief. That's good to know, Mark nodded. We plan to file additional charges. Corporate and law enforcement won't let her get away with this. That same day, Caroline personally visited James's flagship store, accompanied by 2 attorneys from the bank's legal department. They arrived armed with thick binders of documents, ready to take decisive action. Caroline greeted James with a solemn but determined expression. I'm sorry you've had to endure this. We're moving forward with a lawsuit against Linda Pearson for defamation, malicious harassment, and breach of her confidentiality agreement. One of the attorneys, a tall woman with a calm demeanor, added, We've also worked with the local district attorney's office. They're considering criminal charges based on her repeated harassment and false reports. James felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Thank you, he said, voice tinged with relief. I wasn't sure how long this would go on. Caroline placed a hand on James's shoulder. You have the full support of Bank of America, Mr. Wheeler. We stand by you and regret everything you've been put through. If there's anything else we can do, please let me know. At that moment, the memory of that humiliating day in the bank lobby surfaced in James's mind. He had been ignored, disrespected, and made to wait for hours. Now, ironically, the same institution was rallying behind him, ensuring that Linda's wrongdoing would not prevail. The final confrontation occurred 2 weeks later in a quiet courthouse hallway. Linda Pearson, eyes sunken and hair disheveled, stood with a public defender by her side. Despite her worn appearance, she clung to an air of defiance. On the other side stood James, flanked by Caroline and the bank's legal team. Linda was facing a hearing to determine whether a restraining order would be granted to protect James and his business from her continued harassment. Though criminal charges were pending, this hearing was a vital step in ensuring Linda kept her distance. When the judge entered, the hearing commenced with a presentation of evidence, the threatening calls, the forged documents Linda attempted to create, the smear campaigns online, and the eyewitness account of her trespassing at James's store. Linda's public defender tried to argue that she was under emotional distress and did not pose a real threat. But the prosecutor countered with a detailed account of Linda's ongoing efforts to harm James's reputation. The judge, unimpressed by Linda's excuses, granted the restraining order. As Linda was escorted away, her eyes locked onto James one last time with a searing glare. But the satisfaction James felt was tempered by the sobering reality of how prejudice and bitterness had driven Linda to such extremes. With the restraining order in place and Linda's case moving through the legal system, James finally felt free to focus on his business expansion without fear of sabotage. His new loan allowed him to open 2 more tech repair shops in underserved neighborhoods, each providing stable jobs and training programs for local youth. The public scrutiny sparked by the allegations had, ironically, increased awareness of his mission, attracting more customers who admired his perseverance. Caroline continued to check in, ensuring the bank upheld its promise to support James's vision. Mark facilitated a small community grant that provided scholarships for his internship program. Gloria, the head of community outreach, organized a ribbon-cutting ceremony for one of James's new shops, featuring local media coverage and a supportive crowd. During the ceremony, James cut the ribbon and spoke into a microphone, addressing a lively audience. "I want to thank everyone who believed in me, even when it seemed easier to believe lies. This is the start of something bigger than me, bigger than my stores. It's about unity, hope, and creating pathways for others to succeed." Applause thundered, and in that moment, any lingering shadows from Linda's smear campaign felt distant. Drowned out by the community's exuberant cheers, weeks blended into months. James's stores thrived, and he became something of a local figure, a businessman whose story exemplified resilience in the face of discrimination. Local publications did feature stories on him, highlighting how the once contentious relationship with Bank of America had evolved into a model partnership for community investment. Meanwhile, Linda's legal battles trudged forward. Rumors circulated that she had lost her house due to mounting legal fees. Facing charges of harassment, defamation, and potential fraud for forging documents, she stood on precarious ground. Some said she had left the state, seeking a fresh start. Others whispered she was still lurking around, waiting for a chance to strike again, though there was no evidence she had violated the restraining order. Despite everything, James refused to let fear rule his life. He focused on the daily tasks that built his success, maintaining quality services, training new employees, and sustaining the internship program that gave local teens a valuable taste of the tech industry. Occasionally, he thought of Linda with a complex mix of pity and anger, but he also recognized that her downfall was a testament to karma, that prejudice and malice, left unchecked, would eventually consume those who wielded them. One brisk autumn morning, James received a letter stamped with the official seal of Bank of America. Inside was a formal invitation to attend an executive luncheon. The event would honor local entrepreneurs who had demonstrated exceptional resilience and community contribution. Among the signatories were Caroline Walsh and Gloria Riley, who had championed his cause from the beginning. Smiling, James felt a warm wave of gratitude. The invitation symbolized how far he'd come, from being made to wait 2 hours in a lobby to being recognized as a key partner by the bank's leadership. On the day of the luncheon, James arrived at a sophisticated event hall, greeted by staff wearing black ties and offering sparkling water on silver trays. He spotted other local business owners he admired and approached them for conversation. Many already knew his story, nodding respectfully when he introduced himself. After a series of speeches praising small business owners, Caroline took the podium. She described James as someone who transformed adversity into opportunity, forging a path for positive change. The room erupted in applause as she called James to the stage to accept a plaque for outstanding community impact. Standing at the lectern, James thanked the bank's leadership, his employees, and the community. He was living proof that genuine support backed by integrity could turn a nightmare into a triumphant success story. Later that evening, after the luncheon had ended and the guests dispersed, James found himself walking alone through the now quiet banquet hall. Caroline noticed him lingering and approached. "Quite a day, isn't it?" she said, her tone light but respectful. James nodded, running a finger over the engraved plaque he was still holding. "It's surreal. I can't help but think how this all started me in that lobby, waiting. I never imagined it would lead here." Caroline's smile carried a trace of sadness. "I'm sorry you had to experience that, but I'm not sorry we got to meet you. The bank needs partners like you who push us to live up to our values." Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a clapping sound from across the room. A voice echoed in the empty hall, dripping with sarcastic applause. James tensed but relaxed when he realized it was just Mark, the friendly executive. Returning from retrieving his coat, Mark laughed, heading their way. "I thought I'd missed you too. Great speech, James. We're proud of you." James offered a grin. For once, there was no trace of tension or worry. Surrounded by allies who believed in him, he felt truly at peace, vindicated, respected, and ready to take on whatever came next. In the months that followed, James's chain of tech repair shops became a local success story, frequently highlighted in business journals. Underrepresented youth who interned there graduated into promising tech careers, some returning to help James open new branches. The positive ripples of his struggle continued spreading throughout the community. Meanwhile, Linda Pearson's name rarely surfaced anymore. Sources said she faced a series of legal defeats, including hefty fines. Even if she managed to avoid jail time, her professional life in finance was all but over. The world moved on without her, at the helm of that once intimidating bank branch. One bright morning, James walked past the Bank of America branch he had first entered so many months ago. Through the glass doors, he saw new posters advertising fairness and inclusivity. A new manager was chatting amicably with customers, ensuring each was seen and heard. James paused to appreciate how different things looked. For a moment, he remembered the 2-hour wait, the mounting frustration, and Linda's cold dismissal. Then he smiled. Sometimes, karmic retribution arrives swiftly, dismantling arrogance and bigotry. Other times, it's a slower process. Either way, justice had prevailed, and so had he. With renewed determination, he walked on, ready for the bright future ahead. Thank you for watching this intense and transformative journey of courage, perseverance, and well-earned retribution. When James first walked into that bank, he had no idea the hidden biases waiting to challenge him. Yet, by staying true to his vision and character, he emerged stronger, becoming the driving force for lasting change in his community. Through unexpected twists and dramatic confrontations, we witnessed how karma eventually found its mark, ensuring that prejudice and deceit could not flourish unchecked. If you found this story gripping and inspiring, please take a moment to like this video, share it with friends who appreciate powerful stories of justice, and subscribe to our channel for more tales of triumph, transformation, and hope. Thank you for your support.